What is going on, you movie-loving badasses? Filling in for my man, PhatSamuraiGuy. Woo! All right, welcome, man. Let me switch over so everybody can see you on stream. How you doing?
Good, man. Yourself?
Oh, man, I'm hanging in there, doing my thing. I'm trying to look out for our buddy here. He's going through a rough time, obviously,
Great thing you're doing. I'm really glad you're doing this for Samurai.
Yeah, I saw his video and I was really I was touched, and he's such a good guy. I fell in love with his channel like in late 2018, 2019. And then we started talking. I reached out to him about doing some streams together, and then ever since then we've kept in contact. And so I know that he puts a lot of energy into his YouTube, and I'd hate to see him miss out, and miss out on doing these things. And I think it'd also be good for him. He'll see us all hanging out together and kind of just keep the train going and hopefully lift his spirits, So, yeah, definitely. So, all right. So we're going to get started here. We're going to talk about Predator. We're going to just have a general discussion. Not, we don't really have to go into a crazy deep dive review. Everyone's seen this movie, but that doesn't mean I don't love talking about it because it's one of my favorite Schwarzenegger movies. And the design for the Predator is just so amazing. And you said you saw it in theaters. I heard you say that in chat, right? I never got to see it in theaters, so that must have been exciting.
Yeah, and it was funny because I was probably about 17 when it came out, and I remember it's one of those weird things where like I really enjoyed the film, but you kind of remember certain things when you see certain films in theaters. And one of the opening trailers before you got the Predator was actually Jaws: The Revenge. And as bad as that movie was,
that was a bad movie.
Another shark movie, So I was like, all right.
So one of my favorite parts in this movie, I know this sounds morbid, but actually one of my favorite parts of this movie is when Ventura gets his chest blasted open. And it's so funny because when you look at that shot, you see obviously you see the blood coming out. But later on, when they turn him over, he's got this gaping hole in his chest. And I remember I was like maybe 12 or 13 when I saw this. And I'm like in shock. I had never seen something so grotesque. And so I know it sounds crazy, but because it's such a memorable scene for me, seeing it as a kid, that every time that scene comes up in this movie, I always kind of get excited in a weird kind of way. I'm like, oh my God, this is the part that just caught me as a kid. So like what's your favorite part of the movie?
Oh man, so many really. I think one of the biggest moments for me is probably when Schwarzenegger is running away from the Predator and falls into the lake after falling down the waterfall, and then he's in the mud, and the Predator comes out of the water and he can't see him because of the mud. I thought that was like such a cool thing that happened at that moment.
Yeah.
How he can kind of cloak himself against the Predator. So that was a really cool moment for me with that.
Yeah, and it was very good storytelling too, because they showed you, they didn't tell you. Something we don't get a hell of a lot these days in movies. A lot of info dump these days. But yeah, that was a very good revelation, because up until that point, you just thought this thing is unstoppable. He doesn't have a weakness. And the other thing too is they do give you a sense of feeling that there is weakness when they show him bleed. But so I that's what makes the reveal of the fact that he can't see if you got mud on you a little bit extra special, because now you realize, all right, so this guy's got multiple weaknesses. Not only can he be cut and bleed, but now he can't see. You can blind him. So it was really good writing. And that's what I kind of feel like the Predator is so underrated when you really kind of sit back and look at the movie. The pacing in the beginning is it's a very good blend of thriller, horror, sci-fi, and action. Yeah. And it blends together so well that I kind of feel like, even though everybody says it's a classic, at the time it came out, I kind of feel like it was ahead of its time.
I agree. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So we're going to do a poll here in a second. I want to hear what you guys have to say about the Predator. It'll be 4 choices, and I'll never be able to pick all the right ones, but I kind of want to get a sense of where you guys are at. So, so tell me in general, when we talk about the Predator, from the first movie to where the series is at now, where do you think they went wrong?
Oh boy.
That reaction says it all.
Yeah. To be honest, at this point in time, I've pretty much tuned out after two. Like, I haven't
Yeah.
seen the other ones. I kind of give them credit for trying to think outside the box, but it isn't working for me. Whatever they're doing just isn't working. And I'm a little intrigued by the new one just because it takes place like pre Predator 1. So it's like, okay, we got a little bit more archaic and, Aztec type tribal thing going on here. So maybe this is going to be kind of cool. But I don't know. It's probably the same problem they've been having with the Aliens versus the Predator series. Like they can't seem to get it right. You mentioned the Dark Comics. That's the first time I had ever seen that.
Yeah.
And then like I have some books, like a trilogy of books where a particular character named Noguchi goes off planet and teams up with the Predator to hunt the aliens. And like that was sort of the kind of the premise of the first Alien versus Predator movie, but they didn't quite do it the way that that book was written. So
Yeah, it seemed it first of all, just here's my issue with that in that movie is that she like a she's like a mountain climber. So she went from a mountain climber to fighting with a spear and a shield with the Predator against a queen alien. Like, I mean, it's like, yes, I know we can suspend our disbelief, but at least try a little bit to kind of ground this, yeah. Oh, the soundtrack, of course. The Chris Leotis mentions in chat the soundtrack to Predator. It is phenomenal. That is the other thing too. When they're kind of like walking through the jungle and you hear the boom, 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 and it's very, very subtle but very obvious at the same time. And yeah, that's what I'm talking about in terms of the buildup and the a little bit of a uncomfortable feeling, like something's gonna happen, you just don't know when, and that's just so good. And I kind of feel like that is a horror aspect you don't see too much these days, because now it's all about like the jump scares. We feel like we got to give people their money's worth, so we're gonna do a jump scare. Yeah, that's a good point, Chris. The music's definitely top notch. Did you see the most recent Predator, which is I think the one where the guy ends up in a suit of armor at the end, like Iron Man?
yeah, I did. Actually.
Yeah. Oh God, that was so terrible.
Yeah, it was very
Yeah. So, but no, going back to the Predator, because that's the movie we're discussing. I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that the guy in the movie who played, he had the glasses. Hawkins. He direct that movie? Somebody told me Shane. I think his name's Shane. Is it Shane Black or?
Yeah, you might be right. I think so.
I think he did, but yeah, and the other thing that I find cool about this movie, and I kind of want to see what you think about this opinion. One of the things I think that make it so underrated is when you look at how it was kind of billed in certain areas of the movie to be like a horror film, and it's very unconventional for the 80s, because the 80s horror films was often revolved around women, or teenagers and sex, and there's always the female heroine being chased by the killer. And this movie, you don't get that. You got a bunch of beefcakes running around. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's one of the other reasons it gets underrated, is because compared to what we got in the 80s for movies in this area, you're not used to seeing a bunch of guys, especially big, strong guys with guns and muscles, just being dominated and picked off by a ruthless alien killer. But it works. It works so well. And it's like, what do you think about that? Do you think that the dynamic of what was going on in the 80s kind of hurt? Now, I don't want to say hurt this film, but maybe people kind of didn't see it in the same light because it didn't follow that formula?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was kind of funny was, despite how big Arnie was during that time, it seems like they were always kind of frowning upon his movies, like it was just machoism.
Yeah.
They didn't take it seriously enough. And then you add in the stuff you just brought up about the horror aspect. Like, it's not your traditional type horror themed movie, because it's not some little girl and half naked running around away from these killers. So you've got all these guys who can hold their own as fighters, and they're trying to fight this other being that's otherworldly and has all this technology that they can't deal with.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. What do you let me see. Childish Landino, Schwarzenegger over titties. I agree. I mean, I like a good pair myself, but in terms of movie, I'm with you. I'm with you, Childish. Alien versus Predator Requiem never needs to see the light of day again. It's not good enough to be a B movie. It's a D movie. Alien versus Predator Requiem had a bunch of problems. The biggest problem is you really actually couldn't see the movie. It was very, very dark.
I compared that one to the first one.
Well, actually, it's funny you said that, because I was just gonna say, in some ways, I actually like it better because at least it's violent. I mean, in the early part of the movie, you got a chest burster coming out of a kid, and they didn't try to fluff that by cutting away. You saw it. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty brutal. I'm like, that scene and in it, when the kid gets his arm bitten off in the beginning, always stick with me. I'm like, wow, they really show kid violence on screen. That's balls.
I think the surprising moment of that for me was the blonde girl who you think is going to survive. She gets taken out by that like throwing star thing that he uses. And that moment that happened, I was like, yes, this is right.
Yeah. Oh, Rob, check your dono. You may shit yourself. Oh, somebody do that. Well, like I said, this is all for Phat Samurai Guy. So if you guys are coming through like that, believe me, he's gonna appreciate it, and I think he needs it. It's always good to show support. I'm glad you guys came through, and I'm glad you're here, Anubis, because I was like, oh, Steve Miller. No wonder, Steve, you went a little too ham, so it put you in pending status. But so sometimes when people make donos that are a little too high, PayPal will be like, what are you doing? And so I got to go in and accept it. But let's go give Steve a round of applause for showing support. $200 donation for the Phat Fam. Very, very nice. Thank you, Steve, so much. Thank you so much. Let's see what his message says here.
Stephen Miller tipped $200. Hello everyone, this donation goes out to PSG. I hope he is doing well and want to wish him the best.
Very nice. Thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, so far for your donos. So we'll keep the conversation going here. Sorry, I didn't get that poll up yet, but I'll get it up in a few seconds because I have this mechanical keyboard, so when I type, it's really loud, and I don't want to type while you're talking, and then so maybe we'll do it at the end of the conversation.
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned the latest one coming out. I don't know anything about it. So were you saying that they're going like pre-1988 movie? Like, how far back are they going?
Apparently going back to like very early. So if you think like the only thing I can really compare it to is Apocalypto.
I love that movie.
Yeah, so it's got something of that vibe, and again, this is where I was thinking about the books I had. There's a chick that I think is going to be one of the leads in, I think, but it's going to be all pre like Arnold Schwarzenegger, so it's going to be way back. So even before the Western stuff, and you remember in Predator 2, he throws him that gun from the wall.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's going to be long back. So it's going to be very interesting how they do that. Now, of course, as you and I know, the recent films have tried different things and not worked. So this could easily bomb, but at least it has a premise that I kind of like.
All right. That's awesome. I think King Venom, you're saying 1719?
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause there was, 1719. Okay. Damn, that's going to be interesting. So when is this one supposed to come out? I know so little about this one.
This year, I think.
This year, really?
I think fall. Yeah.
Fall? Anybody know who's directing it? Do you know who's directing it by any chance? Or chat, do you know who's directing it?
I forget already.
This year? So it does come out this year. Wasn't that the year on the gun passed to Danny Glover in character? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, I think it was actually. Now that I think about it.
Really? You know what? I got to look that up now because that's pretty twisted.
Yeah.
Let me see. What year was the gun the Predator gave to Danny Glover? 1718.
Oh, so there you go.
So there you go. 1718. Wow. That's pretty trippy.
Yeah.
It's being directed by Dan Trachtenberg. Never heard of him. Has he?
Someone said he did Cloverfield Lane, so.
Oh, Cloverfield Lane was good.
Yeah.
So that's encouraging, because even though that movie was already kind of created before it came out, it wasn't even a Cloverfield movie. He did a good job directing that.
Yeah. Did you find? I mean, we're going off topic a little, but the end of that movie is like the worst part of it for me with the aliens. Like I liked everything else before that.
Yeah, it was a disappointment, because I'm a huge fan of the Cloverfield movie, and when this movie came out, I really thought it was an invasion of the kind of monster that we saw in the first movie. Even though they said it wasn't directly connected, you would think if they're going to make an ending like that, why make it aliens? And then there was the other Cloverfield Paradox on Netflix, which was a mess. And then now they are doing Cloverfield 2, so we'll see where they're going to go with that.
Right.
Yeah, it says 1718. I just looked it up, so that's what it said. So now one of the things that also Predator is known for is just good memeing, especially with the Dylan, you son of a bitch. I mean, that meme, those guys were just ripped back in those days, man. But it's amazing how long this movie has lasted in pop culture, in terms of not only, I think it's gotten better with age, but just the meme, the Schwarzenegger, Carl Weathers. Yeah. Yep. And then, but I think, looking at this movie, even compared to movies now, this movie still has some brutal killings that have stood the test of time. And not only obviously Jesse Ventura, but Carl, like, what's your favorite kill in the movie?
It's really close, but it is probably Jesse Ventura.
Yeah.
That's like one of the early ones. I do like the scene we see later on, and I think it's after he's killed Billy. You see the spine come out in the shadow or the dark.
Oh yeah. When he I think later on they got his body, but later on I think the Predator comes back and gets it. Is that what it is? There's a scene where he actually takes the body.
Like following, because Billy was trying to take him on, hand-to-hand combat on that log.
Oh, right. I was thinking of Mac, whose real name is Bill Duke. So sorry, I got confused. But yeah, you're right. Billy. It's funny. My first reaction when I saw that movie, and Billy did that, I'm thinking to myself, look, at least give yourself a fighting chance by keeping your gun. I know it's an honor thing, Native American thing, but it's like, you knew he stood no chance the minute he did that. It's like, come on, man. And oh yeah, that's right. Let Biden say it.
Come on, man.
And yeah, I was like, dude, but yeah, you're right. And it was his spine he ripped. Yeah, because he threw him on the log, and you see Billy's face all scratched up, and then he rips the spine out. It would have been interesting to see how Billy died, but they probably did the best thing not showing it, because then like 30 seconds later you hear the scream, and it just sounds brutal. His scream is like, ah!
Well, you brought up the death of Mac, and like that was kind of like the cool effect back then, was the laser target on his forehead, and then when it shoots and like the blood spills over the camera lens, it's like really trippy looking.
That was another good kill. And Carl Weathers' death was like, that was also brutal, because he shot his arm off and then he guts him and lifts him in the air. I mean, this thing was the kill. And then you think about everything going on before these guys even got attacked. All the bodies that were skinned, right? All the bodies hanging from the trees. I mean, thinking back at it now and looking at movies these days, like that kind of teeter on the horror, it's either nothing compares, or a lot of the horror movies now become like just like a kill fest for the sake of being kill fest. Like these deaths in this movie have meaning. There's a certain pattern being developed here by the Predator, which is what makes it so appealing, what makes it so good. I think about a movie like Saw, where I think after like the second movie, they just became like horror porn. They just wanted to make it as elaborate a kill as possible for the sake of doing it. Where in this movie, yes, the kills are elaborate, but it's part of the story. It's part of what this creature does and what this creature is, and that's why it's such a classic.
I think that's why I kind of like Predator 2 when it came out, because I remember watching the trailer for it in the theater, and then like they were saying it was going into the city, the urban jungle, and to me it was a whole different place setting. And so like it's not copying Predator. It's all about the Predator, but it's in a whole different setting. I thought that was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, and actually that's a good point you bring up, because that's another thing that was very new in the Predator movie compared to anything similar to it back in that time, is that this is in a jungle where, other movies in that area were either, like in a camp or, out in suburbia, things like that. This one is just in almost like a no man's land, so to speak. It wasn't like it was very easy for them to get out of there. Chris Leotis, I love the line where he says, "There's something out there, and it ain't no man. We're all gonna die." Yeah, that's. If I would have been there and he said that, I would have probably called for that chopper a lot sooner. That's for sure. Just before I go, the Predator who is featured in the new film is the elder Predator from Predator 2. The gun is invented the year before the Predator gets it, hence the year that's engraved on the gun. Oh, wow. Damn, so there's that much information out on this movie?
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. And I wonder who stars in it. Like, I don't even know who stars. I know very little about this movie. I knew they were working on new one. I didn't even think it was coming out this year. Anybody know anybody big starring in the movie? Chat, if you know, drop a name in the chat, because I know very little about this movie.
I don't think there's any real big names in it, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Want some candy. Yeah, that's Predator 2. That was still good. Predator 2 is also very good, I think.
Oh, yeah. Echo loves that more than the first one.
Yeah, well, it's definitely more action-packed, but it's not any less brutal. You know what I mean?
I thought it was funny because we did a review of that some time ago on one of our podcasts, and the guy that, I can't remember the actor's name, but the guy that plays Scorpio in the beginning, he's also the guy that's in the truck in the first Predator film that runs into it and blows up.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah. Get to die twice in a Predator movie. You gotta love it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's on his resume, that's for sure. A woman, right? Yeah, probably. Is that Amber Midthunder? Never heard of her.
It's the actress, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, who's next? So, and also one of my favorite lines, and the people from the nation know this, because I always do this line. It's not very acceptable these days, but that doesn't mean I don't do it. But when Jesse Ventura, when Blaine is chewing the tobacco in the chopper, and he's like, "It's a bunch of schlock-jawed faggots around here. This stuff will make you a sexual tyrannosaurus, like me." Love that line. I quote that all the time. It's one of my favorite lines.
Or Matt, I thought you were going to go with the one from Glover where he's like, "Hey, pussy face."
He is one ugly motherfucker.
Yeah.
Hey, what's going on, Jonathan? Yeah, so Predator is an all-time classic. When I saw this movie on his father's list, I was like, wow. I mean, he's got such a great, diverse taste in movies spanning decades, and it's like an incredible. If you guys didn't see that video, go check it out. The movies on his list are really good. Love me some Predator. Yeah, I don't know too many people who don't. I've never heard anyone say anything bad about the Predator, and to me, it seems like a fine wine. It's gotten better with age. In fact, I feel more people talk about it now than when it first came out. All right, we're gonna get started with this review. So, Rocky, some of you probably weren't even born when this movie came out. Even I wasn't born when this movie came out. 1976. It was Sylvester Stallone's movie debut. He starred and wrote the movie. And obviously him, Talia Shire, Burt Young, Carl Weathers, Burgess Meredith, for those of you who don't know, also played the Penguin in the Adam West Batman show. And yeah, this was an amazing movie. It's a classic underdog story. All right. And for those of you who have seen it now, I want to mention something real funny here. This movie was a big hit when it came out. Won Academy Award for Best Movie, Best Director, who was John G. Avildsen, and then obviously Best Film Editing. Those are the three, but it was nominated for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It was nominated for 10 Academy Awards. Talia Shire and Sylvester Stallone were nominated for Best Supporting Actor and Actress. And I believe Best Supporting Actor was also Burgess Meredith and Burt Young. I thought maybe Carl Weathers would be in there, but I guess not. This was an incredible film. An incredible film. The music was incredible, which I'm pretty sure also got nominated. Yes, it did. Best Original Song, Gonna Fly Now. So just everything about this movie was fantastic. And classic underdog story about, obviously, as you know, Rocky Balboa, out of his luck, not young. Think he might have been in his early 30s, the character-wise in this movie, and broke, living in the rough streets of Philadelphia, and he's given an opportunity. He's given an opportunity to fight for the championship. It was almost a gimmick. You know, it was supposed to be like a spar, and what ends up happening is Rocky takes the champ to 12 rounds, or 15 rounds in the movie, I should say. And it's just a lovely story because he had no right competing with Apollo. You know, Apollo, if you see the movie, obviously Apollo was much bigger, more physique, faster. And then the great part of the story is the relationship between Rocky and Mickey. All right. Not to take anything away from Adrian. We'll get to that in a minute. But the training montages, the build up, I mean, it's just fantastic. Now, because this movie was such a big hit, the Rocky series of movies gets a lot more love now, and even more respect now than it did back in the 80s. For as much as we love Rocky 3, Rocky 4, Rocky 2, whatever, those movies got hammered hard in the 80s. In fact, if you did a movie with multiple sequels in the 80s, because now it's a commonplace, it wasn't commonplace back then. It was titled, or you were called, they're trying to pull a Rocky. Because to have more than one sequel was very rare, let alone go beyond the trilogy. You know, usually most movies were one and done. There weren't too many part 1, part 2, part 3. And the movies that did have multiple parts were usually like trash movies, like Porky's. You know, you know what I mean? So those movies didn't get a lot of love back in the day. They made money, but they were not so much Rocky 2. Rocky 2 wasn't as obviously as highly rated as the first one, but it still was decently received. Rocky 3 and Rocky 4 were completely trashed by critics. And it was a very common joke. Rocky having multiple sequels was a big common joke back in the day. Like I said, Rocky movies now are loved. They've aged like a fine wine. And God bless Sylvester Stallone, because not only did he take it beyond Rocky 4 with Rocky 5 and Rocky Balboa, but also he kept his IP alive with Creed. Because even though Creed is about Adonis Creed, I think his name is, right, in the movie, it's still Rocky. It's still Rocky's story as well. You know, you just have him training now Apollo's son. And so he's kept his IP alive for years. You know, God bless him for that. And I've loved all the Rocky movies. I didn't, loved Rocky 3. I think Rocky 4 is probably the most action oriented, but also very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Gravitas of a movie, you know, like with the Vegas fight with Apollo right before he gets killed and all that. But anyway, the first Rocky was just an incredible, you know, it's very rare sports movies get the kind of respect that take them all the way to an Academy Award nomination, let alone 10. I mean, I consider a good example of what I consider one of the best football sports movies, Any Given Sunday, because Oliver Stone took making that movie so seriously in terms of the cinematography. He actually had NFL players in the movie, you know, surrounding the primary actors. The football play you saw on the field was real. You know what I mean? Like, you know, those were actors taking hits, you know what I mean? But like I said, a lot of the team was surrounded by professional players, and that's where some of the greater shots came from. So for it to make it the way it did was incredible. But also the reason it did is because it's not all about the boxing. The boxing doesn't come until the end of the movie. It's the buildup and everything happening regarding the fight that makes the movie so good, you know? The unwanted attention that Rocky starts to get as you start going towards the fight. The conflict, the early conflict between, because I got to say, it's been a while since I've seen the movie, but I do recall an early conflict between Mick and Rock regarding him training Rocky, because he had really no interest. But when Rocky got the opportunity, and he was training all by himself to start, drinking the eggs, running outside early in the morning, like at 5 a.m. So there was so many different things going on, you know. So not only with Mickey and Rocky starting off maybe not necessarily on a good foot, and then building up to becoming such a great team, but then you also have Rocky and Adrian. Now, Adrian obviously was the sister of Paulie, played by Burt Young, and this presented another interesting conflict in regards to Paulie and Rocky basically being buddies for a while, and then he, you know, again, when Rocky starts getting all this attention, you see how people kind of start changing around him. You know, even when he's doing the whole. Did this happen in Rocky 1? God, I can't remember now. When he's boxing the meat, that happens in Rocky 1 or Rocky 2? I can't remember now. Either way, because it was kind of similar in the second one too. That's why I didn't do as well as the first one. The point I'm trying to make is that very awkward, very opposites attract relationship between Rocky and Adrian it's kind of cute, and it's almost like you get a mini coming of age story for Adrian in the middle of this movie, because when you meet her, she's so demure and quiet and ultra shy. In fact, she doesn't even look that pretty, right? You see her with these geeky ass glasses on, and she's wearing this coat, and she's got this knitted hat on, and she just looks like she looks older, first of all, and she looks like a complete nerd. But Rocky, being kind of I don't want to say he was kind of aggressive though in that apartment, I got to be real, but he was also very sweet to her. He also treated her very good, and much better than Paulie did. And you start to see that she comes out of her shell. He makes her come out of her shell. So all these little stories going on as it leads up to the fight is what makes this movie so good. And then you get to the fight, which is a good portion of the end of the movie. You're not cheaped out in the boxing match. You get a good solid first 2 full rounds almost, or first 3 rounds if I recall, and then you get a nice montage for about a good 10 minutes for leading up to the more pivotal later rounds. And it's a bloody mess. It is a brutal fight. I love Adrian's journey, how she grows throughout the film, and in the end, she becomes the voice of reason in the film series. Yeah, she does. She's not. Rocky gives her that confidence not only to speak her mind, but he also respects and values her opinion. Something I think that also helps the movie a lot, because back in those days, that was rare. I mean, it was getting better in the 70s, but a woman making her voice heard and then people, especially men, actually respecting their opinion was not a common thing back then. It was far less common, like, in the 40s and the 50s. It started happening more in the 70s because of movements, like especially the women's rights movement. Going back, and that part that continued in the 70s, I should say. So sorry. So I start work so early now, it's like ridiculous. So I'm like, by this time of the night, I'm already starting to get, But what was I gonna say? Yeah, so then you get to the fight, and the fight is just, it's very entertaining. You get the entrances, you got Apollo coming in with his big top hat and his American shorts that have become iconic throughout the series. And the first round is just a bit, it's making me want to watch the movie now. It's crazy. The first round is just a beatdown. I mean, Apollo is just circling the ring and making Rocky look absolutely foolish. Jabs, this and that. But then, like, towards the end of the round, Rocky starts making he catches him. I can't remember if it's the end of the first round or at some point in the second round. I think it was towards the end of the first round. Rocky catches him like this right hook that just stuns Apollo. Yeah, and that's right. It is the end of the first round, because the first round ends with Rocky having Apollo in the corner beating his body. And then I remember the scene so well. Apollo's cornerman is like, he didn't come here something along the lines of he didn't come here to play, he came here to fight. Or I wish I remember the line, but it was a great line. And finally you see Apollo's like, all right, I'm gonna put this guy out right now. And he's still like, swagging and profiling. He ends up breaking Rocky's nose like in the second round. And but then Rocky starts whooping his ass again. And then from there it goes on to the montage, and you see them just beating the living hell out of each other. And Apollo is just pounding his ass. And the beauty of the story is that Rocky will not go down. No matter the beating, I should say he doesn't stay down. He keeps coming. And I remember there was another great scene in the corner of Apollo, and no, he doesn't say that to him in this movie. He says it in the second movie. It is a great line, but it's in the second movie. He tells Apollo. I just want to say it anyway because I think it's such a great line from Rocky 2. He tells Apollo, we don't need a man like that. I saw you beat a man like I ain't never seen a man be beat. And he kept coming. He kept coming. We don't need a man like that in our life, champ. I love that line, man. It's such a good line because this gives more emphasis. And it's true. If you look at this scene just for the fight, I mean, especially for those of you who haven't seen this movie, like Severio said he hadn't seen it, I'm telling you right now, you will never see, it doesn't matter if it's in cinema or especially in real life, a man has never taken a beating like Rocky did in this first fight and come back to tell the tale, let alone keep fighting. And the fight ends off beautifully. It basically ends with Apollo, I think, winning a split decision. I think he got 2 out of the 3. And him and Rocky, before the decision was made, him and Rocky were like, there ain't gonna be no rematch. There ain't gonna be no rematch because they beat the shit out of each other. They both ended up in the hospital after that first movie. I think because Rocky beat the shit out of Apollo's body, think he broke one of his ribs. He ruptured his, not ruptured, but he made him bleed inside, like his kidneys. You ever heard of a boxer? They get hit in the kidneys enough time, the next day they pee blood. So all that shit happened to Apollo because it's Rocky. But anyway, I'm talking about this movie right now. I'm just kind of giving away the whole ending, but I mean, sorry, Severio, whoever else hasn't seen it, I mean, think it's well past due. But Rocky, not only do you get a great action in the ending between the boxing match between Apollo and Rocky, but you also just get a wonderful story leading up to that. You get a great build up to the fight. Apollo plays a very good villain, you know, and it's just a great story. Overall, it's a feel good story about somebody being given an opportunity when nobody else would give him an opportunity and taking full advantage of it. You know, taking full advantage of an opportunity given, because sometimes people blow those opportunities in real life, you know? And it's movies like this that remind you that when you get an opportunity to do something big, you give it 110%. And even if it doesn't always end the way you might want it to end, much like Rocky's fight, you still come out a big winner for showing everybody, or in this case, Rocky showing the world that he is a good fighter, that he did have some talent there. And he had a goddamn good trainer who didn't believe in him in the beginning. And after the fight, well, during the training, but especially after the fight, when you look at the movie series, they were inseparable. Oh my God, thank God you're streaming. Why is that? The new director's cut of Rocky 4 is much better. You even get more from Drago. It makes you understand the character more. I keep hearing that. I got to see it. PhatSamuraiGuy told me that too. He said, go watch the cut, the director's cut. It's all good. I've always wanted to check it out. Yeah, check it out, man. Even if you already told you the ending, just check it out. But yeah, man. But that's Rocky in a nutshell, as far as I remember in terms, because you know it's been a while since I've seen it. But it is, I mean, I've seen it multiple times. I've seen it like hundreds of times. Just I haven't seen it in like the last 2 years, which is pretty rare. I usually always check out Rocky movies from time to time. But yeah, if you haven't seen it, I suggest you go check it out. It's not too many people left in the world, I don't think, that haven't seen it, except the youngins. But yeah, Severio, I know it's age. It's not high definition, although you can get a scaled up high definition version of it. But I'm telling you right now, it is a classic. It is one of the best sports movies, underdog stories that you'll ever see. Such a great movie. All right, so tonight we are going to review The Princess Bride, which I thought was a great movie to review because I've never spoken about it before on this channel. Night, honey. And it's one of my favorite movies, and I've never done a review about it, never spoke about it, never, you know, but yet this is a movie I think everybody can quote the hell out of with good reason. It's got some of the greatest quotes in movie history. So yeah, and you know, I saw it on the infamous, what happened to my camera? Why does it look reddish all of a sudden? Oh well. And it's on PhatSamuraiGuy's dad's movie list, which I gotta say that every time I review that list, it gets better and better. So I had to do this one. I said, absolutely. The Princess Bride. This is a movie I've seen to death. I can't think of too many things I don't remember about this movie. I mean, I watched it a lot. I dated a girl when I was in my early 20s who absolutely adored this movie to the point that she consistently watched it. She could probably do the dialogue for the whole movie, and she quoted the hell out of it. I credit her with being the original quoter of this movie before it became popular, because before that, I had not known anyone who ever quoted this movie, and she did it all the time. So obviously, this movie starring Carrie Elwes, all right, Mandy Patinkin, Andre the Giant, late great Andre the Giant, Robin Wright, who many of you know has been in the Wonder Woman movie, so she's still working on a regular. Carrie Elwes to a lesser extent. He just released a movie called The Hyperions. So he was in a movie with, it was him, the kid from Karate Kid. What's his name? I don't know his real name, but I know Karate Kid. He plays Johnny Lawrence's son. Was it Robbie? Is Robbie his name? Anyway, so he's in it, and a couple of other actors I'm not too familiar with. But so that was his last movie. Robin Wright has been in Hollywood, has been doing stuff for a long time. Not only is she in the Wonder Woman movies, but she also starred in House of Cards with Kevin Spacey before she took over as the main lead, I think in season 4. So, obviously a lot of these actors, Mandy Patinkin's still around. I don't know what the most recent thing he's done. And then of course, just a funny cast altogether, and this obviously Fred Savage, he plays the young boy who's getting the story read to him before bed. So I've never seen this. Well, bits and pieces. Yeah, dude, you got to see the whole thing. Yeah, Andre the Giant was from what I've heard through documentaries, one of the sweetest guys. You know what I mean? As big as Gentle Giant, he was known as. Yeah, if you haven't seen Princess Bride, you gotta get with the now, man. It's it's a classic movie. It's very charming, very heartwarming, very lighthearted, a lot of humor. Carrie Elwes is great in it. I always thought Carrie Elwes was a very underrated actor. He had a lot of range, in my opinion. I mean, I've seen Carrie Elwes do mainly comedy. I mean, obviously, if you ever seen Robin Hood Men in Tights, it's one of his funniest movies. Also, Dave Chappelle's in that movie, a very young Dave Chappelle. Yeah, it's a very funny movie. But he's also done some more serious parts, and then he's done even some, obviously if you've seen the first Saw movie, then you know who he is. He played the doctor that was trapped in the room with the other guy. So he's done a lot of different types of films, not just comedy, but he has done some more serious roles. And I just always thought he had a lot of range. I always thought, I don't know why he never got he came up during the 80s, and during that time there were a lot of other heartthrobs that he had to compete with. And I mean, you're talking about Johnny Depp, right? There were those 80s, and he wasn't doing a lot of he was doing much older roles, I would say. I don't want to say much older, but he wasn't. Johnny Depp always looked young for his age. Well, they both did, really. But Johnny Depp did a lot of 21 Jump Street. So he's the undercover cop who's playing like a high school student. So for some reason, Carrie always just never quite had the frenzy that like a Johnny Depp did at that time. Or
you're looking all smart.
Oh, thank you. They called me sophisticated Rob.
I love it.
Even though I feel Carrie always is a better actor than Johnny Depp. Seriously. I mean, Johnny Depp's a good method actor, but I always felt Carrie always was just a better actor than Johnny Depp. But for some reason, for whatever reason, he just never caught on in popularity like Johnny Depp did. I kind of consider those two like competitors at that time, What's going on, Alex? Princess Bride has a 94% Rotten Tomatoes audience score and a 97. Yeah, and that's accurate. I mean, that's when obviously Rotten Tomatoes is. I never put too much. What's the word I'm looking for? I personally don't put too much steam into their ratings, especially now. But considering that rating was put up there a long time ago, yeah, that's definitely accurate. I think a lot of people would agree with that. But now, forget it. Rotten Tomatoes is. Like I said, for those of you who've watched me for a while, I know there's some Phat Samurai Guys movie dojo army here, but ever since it was found out that Rotten Tomatoes was purposely rating certain movies a certain way so they could keep their access to certain Hollywood studios, I completely don't pay attention to them anymore. I never did to begin with. I mean, obviously we always want to rate our movies based on what we think as opposed to what critics say. But so this movie obviously about Buttercup, princess named Buttercup, who has a servant, and he ends up with a pirate ship. She thinks him to be dead, but turns out he was held captive by the dread pirate Roberts. And after years of service and things of that nature, he eventually ended up becoming the Dread Pirate Roberts. Obviously, a very good tale within the movie about Dread Pirate Roberts that nobody ever actually knows who he is. Every person, he always becomes somebody like basically the Dread Pirate Roberts that captured him. He eventually took over for Dread Pirates. He eventually became the new Dread Pirate Roberts, so to speak. So very, very cool stuff there. But anyway, so the movie is about them reuniting, and then she gets captured again. And basically, he has to go and rescue her. During his journey, he runs into, I gotta pull the names up. I don't remember all the names. So, I mean, just, I think Andre the Giant was Fezzik. And obviously, Mandy Patinkin was Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. I just want to confirm that I got Andre the Giant's name right before I, but I think it was Fezzik, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see here. Yeah, it was Fezzik. Okay, so, so anyway, so he runs into Fezzik and Inigo, and he bests them both in battle, and they eventually become his allies. After Vicini, I think Wallace Shawn, but that was what his name was. I couldn't remember it. Wallace Shawn played Vicini. Inconceivable, yeah, him. So, and then they go forth to rescue Buttercup. I mean, I'm giving you a quick gist here, but they go forth to rescue Buttercup, and such great storytelling here. Obviously, one of the best parts in the movie is Inigo fighting. I think it was. Let me get his name here. Hold on. I don't remember all the character names. Just a couple of them. I think it was Count Rugen. Probably not saying it right. But that one of the classic scenes in the movie where they duel, and I think even though Inigo won, I think he probably should have died with the amount of blood loss he took, being stabbed several times. But that's okay. That's why it's a fairy tale, You killed my father. Prepare to die. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, this movie, I know, it's fantastic. One of my favorite scenes in the movie, a small cameo by Carol Kane and Billy Crystal as Miracle Max and Valerie. This was one of the... It was just great. It's just a great team. Billy Crystal, during that time, we don't see much of him now these days, but during that time, always a funny guy. And in any movie he was in, this particular role, he was just fantastic for as small as it was. He's nearly dead, or something around the lines of he's not fully dead. He's only nearly dead, something like that. I'm paraphrasing here, of course, but the banter between him and Carol Kane, and that again, as short as it was, and even though it was a small camp, it was so good. It was so good. Bye, boys. Have fun storming the castle. You think it'll work? It'll take a miracle. Bye-bye. I mean, it's just a great line right there. So, yeah, and then Robin Wright in this movie. I mean, here's another woman with a lot of range as an actress. But, boy, I got to be honest. She annoyed me for a while in this movie. I almost was like, don't rescue this bitch. Am I the only one that felt that way? I can't be the only one that felt that way about Robin Wright's character Buttercup in this movie, right? Andre the Giant, I believe this is the only movie I've ever seen him in. And, he was Andre the Giant. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it just because he's passed away. But, even if he was himself, I think that was perfect for the role he played. I mean, again, a gentle giant, he had a couple of pretty funny quips. Can't remember them off the top of my head, but I remember he had at least one or two lines that were pretty funny. So, I mean, this movie's just a joy to watch. In fact, I'm glad that this was on Phat Samurai Guy Dad's list because it reminds me of just how wholesome this movie is, even though there's a couple of jokes in there that, but I mean, I have never made my kids watch this. And if I didn't see this on his list, I probably wouldn't consider it now. Now that I've been reminded of how great of a movie this is, I got to show it to my kids. I think they would love it. Have fun storming the yeah, I know that's the line I quoted a few minutes ago. That's one of my favorite lines. Yeah, just an overall great cast and great cameos as well. The other thing I like too is when they're in the forest, and I'm trying to remember, rodents of strange and unusual size. Is it? He says it so fast in the movie, and I'm like, rodents of strange. ROSAUSs, I think that's it. I'm not 100% sure. I hate typing on phone. It's my weakness. Such big fingers, little screen. Yeah, I'm the same way. I always have typos on the phone, especially. That's a pretty crazy scene with the big ass crazy rats coming out of the ground. Fairly, I don't want to say, I mean, I maybe for a kid, pretty creepy and even bloody, so because he's getting all bitten up and stuff like that. But yeah, it's everything about this movie is so good. It's amazing how this movie has just stood the test of time. It is, the other day, funny, this came out in '87. It's still a big time movie now. But this is one of those things that I spoke about the other day when it comes to certain movies that just have a cultural impact, and this is one of them. This is why it stood the test of time. This is why people still talk about it now. There were a lot of movies in the '80s that had that impact. I don't think it's as I don't think you see that as much now, simply because originality in Hollywood is not as common as it was back then. You think about a lot of the movies in the 80s or in the 90s that were really bad, but if we got to say one thing good about them, is a lot of them were original. The Princess Bride, as far as I know, I'm not sure if it was based on a television, on a novel. I can't recall, but the reason I'm bringing that up is because even if it was, that story still in and of itself is still original compared to the kind of popular novel to movies you get now. You think about movies like The Hunger Games or what's the one, the Divergent, Maze Runner, all these tween books that are trilogies, but there really is no originality to them at their core or at the premise. This is why a series like Harry Potter has become so cultural, because it is a very original story in terms of blending fantasy with the real world, which I think has done more cultural damage than good. But that's not the writer's fault, And when I say that, I mean because now you have people that are obsessed with Harry Potter, and to the point where there's actually a Quidditch league out there, like a legit Quidditch league. Even though these motherfuckers can't fly on brooms, they're pretending to play Quidditch, and it's actually a professional sport now. Not professional to the point where you can get paid for it, but it's expanding. You'd be surprised how big it's becoming. Quidditch. You know what I mean? Or people just always referring to Harry Potter when they talk about books they've read. You know what I mean? Like, even me, to some extent. Like, I don't read books very often, but some of the most recent books I've read over the years, Harry Potter was one of them. The whole series is one of them. But that's because I'm a fantasy junkie. I love reading fantasy stuff. But the problem with reading fantasy is that you get some fantasy that is a little bit straightforward and a little bit more clear, like Harry Potter, because it was aimed at children when it first came out. I don't think it was for children once you get to book 3. Once you get to book 3 and beyond, it becomes very dark. But then I can't get through books like Game of Thrones or even Lord of the Rings to a certain extent, because the amount of detail and the amount of lore that is in those stories, while they're great stories, make them a little draggy in certain areas, especially Game of Thrones. and I tend to just lose interest. Like I don't have ADHD, but I also don't have the attention span to get through that shit. You know what I mean? I just don't. And they made a quiz show based on for Harry Potter. Yeah, I know. It's insane how. So yeah, Harry Potter is another cultural impact. You just pay attention to most of the movies or books or stories out there that have had cultural impacts, and most of them are original work. You know, like Lord of the Rings, like Game of Thrones. You know, original work, not something that's been regurgitated like tween trilogies, like, you know, Twilight or Divergent or, you know, The Hunger Games and shit like that, or Maze Runner and all that stuff. You know, a lot of those have very similar premises within the story, and I think that's why The Princess Bride has become as popular as it's become over the years, because it's an original tale. It's very wholesome for the most part. You know, there's some quips in there that are good for the adults, but they fly over the heads of most kids. It's funny. It's cute. It's you know, it's just a all around fun. There's really nothing bad you can say about the movie. You know, obviously it's become more popular over the years than it was initially when it came out, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see here. I'll pull up the numbers and how it did. So actually, you know, for considering at the time it came out and what the budget was for the movie, it made back almost half of its budget. So it did 16 million at the box office, but it made 30 million. Made 30 million at the box office, but it cost them 16 million to make it. So it's not too bad. But you got to understand, this movie came out during the very, very aggressive, popular run of action movies in the 80s. It was hard to compete. A lot of adrenaline and a lot of testosterone going into the theaters for dudes. So this wasn't exactly the movie that was going to, you know, kick in the doors. So while it made a profit, I think it's probably done a lot better now than it did back then, in terms of, you know, just its longevity has obviously made it more than profitable. Yeah, this is very low fantasy, this movie. I mean, it is fantasy tale, but obviously on a different scale. Pretty much every line in the film is an iconic quote. Yeah, it's the most quoted movie, I think. I think there are exactly 39 different quotes that are known to be popular from this movie. When I looked it up, 39 different quotes. Hi, Rob. Happy to see you again. Prayers go to you and your family. Well, I appreciate that, but we need to give prayers to our good friend, PhatSamuraiGuy. That's why we're here on a Wednesday night. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I know. 39 different quotes. That's a lot. So yeah, man, Princess Bride is great. As you know, I can't say enough things about it. It has been a long time since I've seen it, but I've seen it enough to remember most of the movie pretty good. But I'm definitely gonna have to check it out again. And now that I've been reminded of its greatness, I gotta make my kids watch it. I know it sounds horrible. Make them, probably not make them. They're usually pretty open. Like my son likes A Never Ending Story. I mean, there's an old movie, and he watched that some time ago, and he loved it. He loved it. He watched it multiple times. Obviously, he watches the '86 Transformers movie like it's a modern day cartoon. He loves watching that. He still loves. My son is a very old school person, man. He loves all the Godzilla Showa movies more than anything, and he loves Transformers in Generation 1. You know, the original Ghostbusters cartoon. He loves all those 80s cartoons, and I have not force-fed him this stuff. He just finds it on Amazon, and he's like, Dad, can I watch this? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I used to watch this. And he falls in love with it. All right, guys, have a good night, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Take it easy.